The gavel hit the wooden block with a sound that echoed through my chest like a gunshot. Judge Morrison's voice seemed to come from underwater as he delivered the words that would destroy my world. Joint custody is denied. Full custody is awarded to the father, David Martinez. I gripped the edge of the defendant's table so hard my knuckles went white. The courtroom spun around me like a carnival ride gone wrong. My lawyer, Patricia Chen, placed her hand on my shoulder, but I couldn't feel it through the numbness spreading through my body like ice water in my veins. "No," I whispered, the word barely escaping my lips. "No, this can't be happening." But it was happening. In that sterile courtroom in downtown Phoenix, Arizona, on a Tuesday morning in March 2023, my entire life was being dismantled piece by piece. The judge's voice continued, but the words became white noise against the roaring in my ears. David sat across the aisle with his attorney, Marcus Webb, a shark in a $1,000 suit who'd made me look like an unstable woman during cross-examination. David's face was stone, but I caught the flicker of triumph in his dark eyes. The same eyes that used to look at me with love now held nothing but cold satisfaction. "Mrs. Martinez," Judge Morrison continued, "you will be granted supervised visitation every other weekend, pending completion of anger management classes and psychological evaluation." Anger management. The words hit me like a slap. I thought about the night David had pushed me against the kitchen counter during one of our fights, how I'd shoved him back in self-defense, how he'd called the police and played the victim perfectly, claiming I was unstable and dangerous to our children. I turned to look at Emma and Lucas, my 7- and 9-year-old babies, sitting in the back row with David's mother, Margaret. Emma's blonde curls caught the fluorescent light, and she was clutching her worn, stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts. Lucas sat rigid, his face pale, trying to be brave like he always did when Mommy and Daddy fought. The courtroom door creaked as people began to file out. David approached me, his lawyer trailing behind like a well-dressed predator. "Sarah," he said, his voice artificially gentle, "this is what's best for the kids. You know that, right? They need stability." I stood up slowly, my legs shaking like autumn leaves. "Stability?" My voice cracked. "You took my children away from me and you're talking about stability?" "You did this to yourself," David replied, his mask slipping for just a moment. "All those times you lost it, screaming at me in front of Emma and Lucas. The judge saw right through your act." Patricia stepped between us. "That's enough, Mr. Martinez. Please respect the court's decision and allow my client some space." But David wasn't done. He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "You were always too emotional, Sarah. Too unpredictable. The kids deserve better than walking on eggshells around their mother." Those words, too emotional, too unpredictable, would haunt me for months. They were the exact phrases his lawyer had used to paint me as an unfit mother. The same words the judge had echoed in his final decision. I walked out of that courthouse like a zombie, Patricia's voice fading behind me as she tried to discuss appeals and next steps. The Phoenix sun blazed overhead, but I felt cold to my bones. My phone buzzed with messages from my sister Rebecca and my best friend Maria, but I couldn't bring myself to read them. That night, in the apartment I'd rented after David kicked me out of our family home, I collapsed on the bathroom floor and cried until my throat was raw. The walls seemed to close in around me, and I could smell the cheap vanilla candle I'd bought to make the place feel less like a tomb. I called Emma and Lucas, but David's voice answered instead. "They're sleeping, Sarah. You can talk to them during your scheduled calls." "David, please," I begged, my voice hoarse from crying. "Just let me say goodnight to them. Please." The line went dead. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Red-rimmed eyes, tangled brown hair, hollow cheeks. This woman looking back at me was a stranger. Where was the confident marketing director who used to command boardrooms? Where was the mother who used to sing lullabies and braid Emma's hair? That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to let David's words define me. I wasn't going to be the broken woman he expected me to become. I was going to rise. 6 months after the divorce, I stood in my new downtown Phoenix apartment, staring out at the city skyline as the sun painted the desert mountains in shades of amber and rose. The space was nothing like the suburban house I'd shared with David. It was smaller, modern, with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows that filled the rooms with natural light. But it was mine. The transformation hadn't been easy. Those first few weeks after the courthouse were the darkest of my life. I'd taken a leave of absence from my marketing job at Morrison & Associates, spending most days in sweatpants, surviving on takeout and the occasional text from Emma and Lucas that David allowed through. "Mommy, I miss you," Emma had texted one evening, followed immediately by another message. "Daddy says I can't text you except on weekends." That message was my wake-up call. I'd enrolled in therapy with Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, a no-nonsense psychologist who specialized in helping women rebuild after divorce. Her office smelled like lavender and had plants everywhere. Peace lilies, snake plants, a massive fiddle leaf fig that somehow made the clinical space feel alive. "Sarah," Dr. Rodriguez had said during our 3rd session, "you're not the woman David described in that courtroom, but you have to start believing that before anyone else will." She was right. I'd been so focused on defending myself against David's accusations that I'd forgotten who I actually was. The woman who'd built a successful marketing career from scratch. The mother who'd stayed up all night when Lucas had pneumonia, never leaving his bedside. The wife who'd supported David through law school, working 2 jobs to keep us afloat. I started with small changes. New haircut, a sleek bob that made me look professional and put together. New wardrobe, gone were the frumpy cardigans and mom jeans, replaced with tailored blazers and confidence-boosting dresses. I joined a CrossFit gym in Scottsdale, where the early morning workouts left me exhausted, but strangely energized. The real breakthrough came when I decided to leave Morrison & Associates. My boss, Janet Morrison, was sympathetic about my situation, but I could see the doubt in her eyes every time she looked at me. I was the woman who'd lost custody of her children. Clearly, something must be wrong with me. Instead, I took a leap that terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. I started my own digital marketing consultancy, specializing in helping small businesses build their online presence. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was rebuilding other people's brands while reconstructing my own life. My first client was Rosa Martinez, no relation to David, thankfully, who owned a struggling bakery in downtown Phoenix. Rosa was a single mother herself, working 16-hour days to keep her business afloat and support her teenage daughter. "I don't have much money," Rosa had said when she walked into my apartment-turned-office. "But I'll pay you what I can. I just need someone to believe in what I'm doing." I looked at this woman, flour still dusting her apron, exhaustion etched in the lines around her eyes, but determination burning bright in her voice, and saw myself. "Let's make your bakery impossible to ignore," I told her. Within 3 months, Rosa's Dolce Vita Bakery had a waiting list for their custom cakes and a social media following that had quadrupled. More importantly, I'd found my groove again. The confident, capable woman David had tried to erase was clawing her way back to the surface. My supervised visits with Emma and Lucas were stilted and awkward at first. The court-appointed supervisor, Mrs. Patterson, sat in the corner of the visitation room like a hawk, taking notes on every interaction. The kids seemed confused and distant, like they were visiting a stranger rather than their mother. "Why can't you come home, Mommy?" Emma asked during our 4th visit, her big blue eyes filled with confusion. I knelt down to her level, choosing my words carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups have to live in different houses, sweetheart, but that doesn't mean I love you any less." "Daddy says you're sick," Lucas chimed in, his 9-year-old voice matter-of-fact. "He says that's why you can't take care of us." My heart shattered, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm not sick, buddy. I'm actually getting stronger every day. And no matter what, you and Emma are the most important people in my world. I made those visits count. We'd play board games, work on art projects, read stories. I'd ask about school, their friends, their dreams. Slowly, I watched the walls between us start to crumble. Meanwhile, David's social media presence was becoming increasingly visible. Facebook posts of him at soccer games with Lucas, Instagram stories of him braiding Emma's hair, badly, I noted with petty satisfaction, Twitter updates about being a hands-on single dad. The comments were full of praise from our former mutual friends, calling him a hero and such a good father. I blocked him on all platforms, but Maria kept me updated despite my requests for her to stop. He posted another picture, she'd say during our weekly coffee dates at Copper Star Coffee downtown. Him and the kids at the Phoenix Zoo. The caption says, "Building memories with my babies." I don't want to hear it, I'd reply, but the words still stung. What David didn't know was that I was building something too. A new life, a new career, a new version of myself that was stronger and more resilient than the woman he'd torn down in that courtroom. By December, my business had 5 regular clients and a waiting list. I'd moved to a larger apartment in the trendy Roosevelt district, with a separate office space and a guest room that I optimistically decorated for the kids. Bunk beds with Star Wars sheets for Lucas, a princess canopy bed for Emma. I was learning to be alone without being lonely. Friday nights were for meal prep and Netflix. Saturday mornings were for long runs along the Salt River Trail. Sunday afternoons were for reading in the park, feeding the ducks, and planning the week ahead. I was healing, growing, becoming someone I actually liked again. But I was also watching, waiting. Because deep down, I knew David was struggling more than his perfectly curated social media presence suggested. Emma's texts were becoming more frequent. Little glimpses into their daily life that painted a different picture than the one David was presenting to the world. "Daddy burned dinner again," she'd text. "We had cereal for dinner 3 times this week." "Lucas is having bad dreams, but Daddy doesn't know how to help," came another message. I bit my tongue and responded with nothing but love and encouragement, but I was filing away every detail. The woman David had dismissed as too emotional and unpredictable was becoming someone he hadn't expected, patient, strategic, and utterly focused on her children's well-being. December turned into January, and I marked the anniversary of my divorce with a quiet celebration. Not because my marriage had ended, but because I'd survived its destruction and built something beautiful from the wreckage. I had no idea that in just a few months, everything would come full circle in the most unexpected way. March 2024. Exactly 1 year since the gavel had fallen, and my world had imploded. I was sitting in my home office, a converted bedroom in my Roosevelt District apartment, reviewing a social media strategy for a client when my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Mommy, Daddy is really mad today." He threw a plate at the wall. My blood ran cold. I stared at the message, reading it 3 times before my brain fully processed it. David, controlled, calculated David, had thrown a plate? The same man who'd convinced a judge that I was the unstable one? I called immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried Lucas's phone. Same thing. My hands were shaking as I typed back to Emma. "Are you and Lucas okay, sweetheart? Are you safe?" The response came 20 minutes later. "Yes. Daddy said sorry. He's in his room now." I wanted to drive straight to that house, my former house, and demand answers. But I forced myself to breathe, to think strategically. 1 year of therapy with Dr. Rodriguez had taught me to respond, not react. Over the next few weeks, the texts became more revealing. Emma, in her innocent 7-year-old way, was painting a picture that David would never want the world to see. "Daddy forgot to pick me up from school today. I waited for an hour. Lucas made his own lunch because Daddy was still sleeping. Daddy talks to himself a lot now. He sounds angry. Each message felt like a knife to my heart. but also confirmation of what I'd suspected. The man who'd claimed I was unfit to be a mother was drowning in the responsibilities he'd fought so hard to win. I shared my concerns with Dr. Rodriguez during our weekly sessions. Her office had become my sanctuary, those plants still thriving, the lavender scent still calming my nerves. "You can't save him, Sarah," she reminded me during a particularly difficult session in early April. "Your job is to be ready for your children when they need you." "But what if he hurts them?" I asked, voicing the fear that kept me awake at night. "Then you document everything, and you protect them legally. But you can't control David's choices. You can only control your response." She was right, but it didn't make the waiting any easier. My business was thriving. What had started as a desperate attempt to rebuild my life had evolved into something genuinely successful. I now had 12 regular clients and had hired an assistant, Maya, a recent ASU graduate who was hungry and talented. We'd moved operations to a shared workspace in downtown Phoenix, a converted warehouse with exposed brick walls and industrial lighting that made me feel like I was in a tech startup movie. The success felt surreal sometimes. Just over a year ago, I'd been sobbing on a bathroom floor, convinced my life was over. Now I was being invited to speak at marketing conferences and had a waiting list of potential clients. But success meant nothing if my children weren't part of it. The supervised visits had evolved into unsupervised weekend visits after I'd completed all the court-mandated classes and evaluations. Dr. Sarah Chen, the court-appointed psychologist, had written in her report that I showed remarkable growth and stability, and recommended expanded custody. David's lawyer had fought it, of course, but even Judge Morrison couldn't ignore the evidence of my transformation. Every other weekend, Emma and Lucas would come to my apartment, and for 48 hours, I got to be their mother again. Those weekends were everything. We'd cook elaborate breakfasts together. Emma was surprisingly good at flipping pancakes, and Lucas had developed a talent for making perfect scrambled eggs. We'd explore Phoenix like tourists, visiting the Musical Instrument Museum, hiking easy trails in South Mountain Park, or spending lazy afternoons at Steele Indian School Park. "Mom, your apartment is so cool," Lucas said one Saturday afternoon, as we built a blanket fort in my living room. "It's like living in a magazine." Emma nodded enthusiastically. "And you smell like vanilla now. At Daddy's house, everything smells like nothing." These glimpses into their life with David were telling. The house I'd once called home was apparently becoming a sterile, loveless space. The man who'd painted himself as the stable parent was creating an environment where his children felt like visitors rather than family. I bit my tongue and focused on making our time together magical. But I was also documenting everything, just as Dr. Rodriguez had advised. Photos of the kids looking thin and tired when they arrived. Screenshots of concerning text messages. A detailed journal of every concerning story they shared. In May, things took a dramatic turn. Emma called me on a Wednesday evening, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her words. "Mommy, can you come get us? Daddy's scaring me." My heart stopped. "What's happening, baby? Where's Lucas?" "He's hiding in the closet. Daddy's yelling at someone on the phone and throwing things. He doesn't know I'm calling you." I was already grabbing my keys. "I'm coming, sweetheart. You and Lucas go to your high room and lock the door. I'll be there in 15 minutes. The drive to North Phoenix felt like it took hours instead of minutes. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I ran through scenarios in my head. Should I call the police? Should I go in alone? What if David completely lost it? When I pulled into the driveway of the house that used to be mine, I could see lights blazing in every window. The perfectly manicured lawn that David had always been so proud of was scattered with newspapers and Amazon packages, like he'd given up caring about appearances. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding. When David opened it, I barely recognized him. His hair was disheveled, his business shirt wrinkled and stained. His eyes were red-rimmed and wild, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. "Sarah? What the hell are you doing here? Emma called me. She's scared, David. What's going on? He looked over his shoulder, then stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind him. Everything's fine. The kids are fine. You can't just show up here unannounced. Look at yourself, I said quietly. When's the last time you showered? When's the last time you had a real conversation with Emma and Lucas instead of parking them in front of the TV? His face twisted with rage. The same expression I remembered from our worst fights. Don't you dare judge me. Don't you dare come here and act like you know what it's like. What's like? Being responsible for them every single day. The words exploded out of him. Waking up every morning knowing that if I screw up, if I'm not perfect, everyone will see that the judge made a mistake. Do you know what that pressure is like? I stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time in years. This man who'd destroyed my life in court, who'd painted me as unstable and unfit, was completely falling apart under the weight of the responsibilities he'd fought so hard to win. Let me help, I said softly. I don't need your help. The kids do. Before he could respond, the front door opened. Emma peeked out, her face streaked with tears. Mr. Peanuts clutched against her chest. Mommy, you came, she whispered. That's when David broke. His shoulders sagged, and for a moment, he looked like a lost child himself. I can't, he said, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. I can't do this anymore. 3 weeks later, on a Friday, evening in late May, I was in my kitchen making homemade pasta sauce when someone knocked on my door. Not the doorbell, actual knocking, desperate and erratic. I looked through the peephole and felt my world shift on its axis. David stood in my hallway, and he looked like hell. His usually perfect hair was unwashed and hanging in his face. His polo shirt had stains down the front, and his khakis looked like he'd slept in them. But what made my breath catch was what I saw behind him. 2 small suitcases, and Emma and Lucas, looking exhausted and scared. My hands shook as I unlocked the door. David, what's going on? He looked up at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his dark eyes. Complete defeat. I can't do this without you, he said, his voice cracking. I've been trying for over a year, and I'm failing them. I'm failing everyone. Emma pushed past her father and wrapped her arms around my waist, burying her face against my stomach. Mommy, we missed you so much. Lucas hung back, uncertain, but I could see the relief in his 9-year-old eyes. Hi, Mom. I looked from my children to my ex-husband, trying to process what was happening. David, you need to explain what's going on, now. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from our marriage when he was overwhelmed. Can we come in, please? The kids are exhausted. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. David dragged the suitcases into my living room while Emma and Lucas collapsed onto my couch like they were finally home. Are you guys hungry? I asked them, falling back into mother mode instinctively. We haven't eaten since this morning, Emma said quietly. Daddy forgot about lunch. My heart clenched, but I kept my voice calm. Okay. Let me make you something quick. David, kitchen. Now. He followed me into my small kitchen, closing the sliding door behind us so the kids couldn't hear. Our conversation. Talk, I said, crossing my arms. David leaned against my counter, the same counter where I'd spent countless hours meal planning and homework helping and living the life he'd taken from me. Now he looked like a stranger in his own skin. Lost my job, he said quietly. What? 3 weeks ago. The firm let me go. They said my work was suffering, that I was distracted and making too many mistakes. He laughed bitterly. Turns out being a single father isn't as easy as I thought it would be. The irony was staggering. David, who'd convinced a judge that I was too unstable to care for our children, had lost his job because he couldn't handle the exact responsibilities he'd claimed I wasn't capable of managing. What about your parents? Your sister? Why didn't you ask them for help? I tried. His voice was barely a whisper. My mom came for a week, but Emma had a meltdown because she wanted you, and Lucas started wetting the bed again. Mom said she couldn't handle it. And Jennifer... He shook his head. Jennifer said I made my bed and now I have to lie in it. I felt a savage satisfaction at that. David's sister Jennifer had been one of his most vocal supporters during the divorce, constantly posting on social media about what a wonderful father he was and how lucky the kids were to have him full-time. So you come here, I said. To the woman you destroyed in court. The woman you called unstable and unpredictable. Sarah, the woman you said was too emotional to care for her own children. I was wrong. The words came out in a rush. I was so wrong about everything. I thought I could do it better than you. I thought you were weak because you cried when they got hurt, because you worried about every little thing. But you weren't weak. You were just human. You were being a mother. I stared at him. This man who'd been my husband for 10 years, the father of my children, the person who'd nearly destroyed me. He looked broken, humbled in a way I'd never seen before. Those first few months, he continued, I kept waiting for it to get easier. I kept thinking I'd figure out some system, some routine that would work. But Emma cries for you every night. Lucas keeps asking when you're coming home. And his voice cracked. I don't know how to braid hair. I can't remember which snacks they like or how Emma likes her sandwiches cut or what story Lucas wants. At bedtime, I keep messing everything up. Through the glass door, I could see Emma and Lucas on my couch. Emma was showing Lucas the photo album I kept on my coffee table, pictures of all our weekend adventures over the past year. They looked more relaxed than I'd seen them in months. Where have you been living? I asked. We're staying at the extended stay near the airport. I had to sell the house to pay the legal fees and make ends meet after losing my job. He looked around my apartment, the exposed brick walls, the plants thriving in every corner, the artwork I'd collected over the past year. This place is beautiful, Sarah. It feels like home. More than our old house ever did. The admission hung in the air between us. What do you want from me, David? He took a shaky breath. I want to give you back custody. Full custody. The kids belong with you. They always did. The words I'd dreamed of hearing for over a year hit me like a physical blow. Just like that? It's not just like that. It's admitting that I was wrong about everything. It's admitting that I let my pride and my anger destroy our family. It's admitting that you were the better parent all along, and I was too stubborn and too threatened to see it. I felt emotions warring inside me. Triumph, vindication, anger, and something. That might have been pity. You put me through hell, I said quietly. You took my children away from me and made me prove I was worthy of them. You made me feel like I was crazy, like I was a failure as a mother. I know. I lost a year of their lives. A year of bedtime. Stories and first days of school and scraped knees and inside jokes. I know. You destroyed me, David. Completely. And then I had to rebuild myself from nothing. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. And look what you built. Look at this place. Your business. Your life. You're stronger now than you ever were when we were married. You're the mother they need. The mother they've always needed. I looked through the glass door again. Emma had fallen asleep on the couch, her head on Lucas's shoulder. Lucas was gently stroking her hair, a gesture that reminded me so much of myself that it took my breath away. They're good kids, I said. They're amazing kids. Because of you. Everything good about them came from you. The pasta sauce was starting to burn. I turned off the burner and faced my ex-husband fully. If I agree to this, there are conditions. Hope flickered in his eyes. Anything. You get therapy, Real therapy, not just anger management classes. You figure out why you felt the need to. Destroy me instead of just divorcing me. Done. You get help for whatever's been going on these past few months. The drinking, the anger, all of it. Already started. I have an appointment with a counselor on Monday, and you rebuild your relationship with Emma and Lucas slowly. You don't get to disappear from their lives just because you can't handle being their primary parent. I wouldn't do that to them. You did it to me. The words hung in the air, heavy, with truth. David closed his eyes and nodded. What else? You help me explain this to them. Tonight. Age appropriately. And then you stay in a hotel and give us time to adjust. Of course. I opened the kitchen door and walked back to my children. Emma stirred when she heard my footsteps, blinking up, at me with sleepy eyes. Mommy? Are we staying here tonight? I sat down between them, pulling them both close. They smelled like David's cheap hotel soap and exhaustion, but underneath that, they still smelled like my babies. Would you like that? Yes, Lucas said immediately. Can we stay forever? I looked at David, who was standing in the kitchen doorway watching us. The man who'd taken everything from me was willingly giving it back, and I realized something profound. I didn't need revenge anymore. Watching him fall apart while I rose had been enough. Seeing him realize that he'd destroyed the very thing he'd claimed to be protecting was more satisfying than any vindictive act I could have planned. I think we can work something out, I said. That night, after David had gone to a nearby hotel, and the custody papers were signed, I'd called Patricia Chen, who'd rushed over with emergency documentation. I tucked Emma and Lucas into the bunk beds I'd optimistically bought a year ago. Mommy, Emma said as I turned off the light. Are you and Daddy friends again? We're working on it, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups need time to figure things out. But we get to live with you now? Yes, baby. You get to live with me now. Lucas's voice came from the top bunk. Mom, I'm sorry we didn't believe you before. About Daddy being difficult. My heart broke and healed simultaneously. You don't need to apologize for anything, buddy. You're kids. It wasn't your job to figure out the grown-up stuff. I love you, Mommy, Emma whispered. I love you both more than all the stars in the sky. As I closed their bedroom door, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a year. Complete peace. My children were home. My family was healing. And the woman David had tried to destroy had not only survived but thrived. 6 months later, I stood in the same courtroom where my life had been shattered, watching Judge Morrison sign the papers that officially restored my full custody. David sat beside me, looking healthier and more stable than he had in years. Therapy had helped him understand his own trauma and the destructive patterns that had led to our divorce. We'd never be married again. Too much had happened for that. But we'd found our way to being co-parents, united in our love for Emma and Lucas. As we walked out of the courthouse together, David stopped me. Sarah, I need you to know something. What? You winning wasn't about me losing. It was about our kids getting the mother they deserved all along. I looked at this man who'd been my greatest adversary and my children's father, and I felt something I never thought I'd feel again. Forgiveness. They deserve both their parents, David. Healthy versions of both of us. He smiled. The first, genuine smile I'd seen from him in years. Look at that. The woman I called too emotional teaching me about grace. I laughed, surprising myself. Turns out emotional intelligence is actually a strength. Who knew? As I drove home to my children, to the life I'd built from the ashes of my old one, I realized something profound. I'd spent so long thinking that winning meant getting revenge, making David pay for what he'd done to me. But real winning was this: being the person my children needed, building a life I was proud of, and becoming strong enough to forgive, even the person who'd hurt me most. The woman who'd been called too emotional and too unpredictable had become exactly what she needed to be. unbreakable.